Hello, beautiful souls. I want to thank everyone for joining me today. My name is Christy Godwin, and this is my podcast, Spiritual Talk with Christy Godwin and Friends. And I would like to thank Carol Lest for being with me here today. Thank you so much, Carol, for being here.
Thank you for having me, Christy.
Now, I want everyone to understand that as a medium, people come to me when they're grieving. That's what we're here for. My tagline is healing one heart at a time, because truly I hope that through readings that you can get a little bit of peace, just a tad bit of healing in that moment of great grief that you have. Carol came to me for a reading with a friend of hers. She was visiting the town that I live in, and they came for a reading. And she just struck me as, and before this, we were talking, not having moved past her grief, but bringing it with her in a healthy manner. And I just applaud her for that. And so I messaged her and I said, would you like to be here? When I say this is Spiritual Talk with Christy and Friends, I just want this to be an authentic podcast with authentic people going through authentic problems. So we had started, this was actually not going to be a recording. I was just going to talk to Carol about recording it later, but we just dove into some beautiful talk, and I asked her, so do you mind if I record this? So here we are. Now, Carol, you were talking about some questions I asked you. Your husband was diagnosed in 2016 with cancer, correct?
Correct. Kidney cancer at age 51. He was 51 years old.
So what prompted him to go to the doctor? What prompted him to seek that something was wrong?
He had a kidney stone and ended up in the ER. Long story short, they saw a mass on the other kidney and said, you need to look at that. And fast forward, maybe a month later, he got it checked out, and it was pretty bad. It was really bad.
So had he not had this the kidney stone was not related to the cancer?
Not at all.
It was just one of those, I was going to say a fluke, but it really wasn't. It was your gut, his team saying, get to the doctor and get this checked out.
Yeah. I mean, we ended up in a local hospital and they weren't sure what it was. It could have been a cyst. We really weren't worried about it that much. And with kidney cancer, with the knowledge I have now, it is a silent killer. It's a quiet cancer. Many people that are diagnosed with it, it's found by mistake or by happenstance, an accident perhaps. Maybe they're in a car accident and have a body scan and it's found. A lot of times it's quite advanced by the time they find it. Mm-hmm. The people that it's found earlier on, definitely we're working hard on trying to find solutions for that in the medical world.
Mm-hmm. And that is so young. 51, so young. And this was in 2016.
Yes, the summer of 2016.
And then now you figure out it's cancer and he goes in for surgery, correct?
Yes, 12-hour surgery to remove his kidney, and it had eaten through the wall into the vena cava, into his inferior vena cava. So they had to reconstruct all that. It was intense and extreme, and we knew nothing about cancer. We knew nothing about kidney cancer. And we were fortunate to have an excellent thoracic surgeon, an excellent urologist. And when he came out of surgery, it took quite a while before we could see him. In the meantime, they took us into basically like a closet. And it was our two sons and a family friend. And we sat there shocked, and these surgeons showed up kind of like they just won a football game. And I just was like, what's going on? Is this appropriate? And they were explaining what a big deal. They just performed a Hail Mary, in their words. And the surgery was successful in their eyes. And we didn't know what to ask. And I remember, I think I said, how long does he have? And they said, they thought about it. And as I said before, to this day, I'm so thankful for them, because they didn't sugarcoat, and they just said, we bought him time. We bought him time. We didn't know what that meant. And at that point, I went into fight mode, and I talked to my brother's priest in Kansas City, who also has kidney cancer. He called me and he said to me, you need to find an advocate. You need an advocate. If you can't find one, you become one. And I heard him and I took his advice, and that's when my journey began. And we researched this cancer. I joined a group that is the most amazing group out there for kidney cancer, called Smart Patients. And I made friends. To this day, I'm friends with some of these folks, and they're amazing advocates. Most of them are kidney cancer patients. Some of them are caregivers like myself. And I learned, and I asked, and I sought out the best in the world. I had nothing to lose. What are they going to say? You nuts?
So whenever he went in for this 12-hour surgery, at that point, y'all knew it was kidney cancer. But did you know how bad it was?
We did to some extent, because of the reaction of the urologist when he saw the scan.
They
And
didn't tell you anything before going in. You just went in kind of, it was just.
well, they did. They said, yeah, they knew it was really bad, and they weren't sure how he would come out of the surgery. And the way they described somehow he would come out of it, they prepared us for the worst. And we didn't know. Really, we didn't even know if he'd live through it.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, we were.
So now I think it's interesting that, and I had asked you this before I started recording, it was this moment. So we're recording this, because this is exactly what I'm talking about. Now, at the point that his surgery, like, they come out and they tell you, they're honest, which I do appreciate that medical professionals be honest with me. I understand them not wanting to take away hope, but I also want to know what I'm up against.
Mm-hmm.
So you did not go into grieving mode at that moment. Like, the moment they said it's pretty bad, and they told you what stage it was stage 4, correct?
Yeah. They really don't know until they're in there what stage it is. But in our situation, they knew it was in the vena cava. And once you've done enough research, you understand you're pretty bad. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So now he's coming out of surgery, and this was 2016. Was he able to return to any kind of function of life at that point? Was he able to go back to work, or was he?
My husband was absolutely amazing. All over the charts from all the different teams we had, they had Superman written on him. He was seriously, he had kryptonite in his blood, they said. It was funny. And he had so many surgeries, probably a major surgery every 6 months. He did go back to work. My husband didn't want to live without purpose and without a fight. He didn't want to die.
Yeah.
And I don't want to say he was ever in denial. He was a fighter.
Yes.
And at one point,
I love that. I love that, where people can, they're accepting of it, but they're still going to fight. I want to go back to when you were talking about, you could tell from the surgeons or whoever, body language. Actually, my oldest daughter had cancer when she was 17. She had lymphoma. She's now fine. She's had babies, all of that. But I remember they're doing this ultrasound, and I could just tell, I was not a psychic medium, but everyone knows body language. Everyone can read body language. And I could just tell like something happened in her face. And I was like, oh, this is not good. It's like you can tell whenever someone drops into that, like if there's something about their face and it kind of clenches up and their body language is rigid. If you ever see that, it's not going to be good. But I very much appreciate when medical professionals can come out and be honest about this is what you're up against, but still be able to give you that will to fight. And I love that your husband was able to do that. I know with my own daughter, I had, she had been bugging me for a dog. I did not want another dog in my house because everyone with a 17-year-old child knows who's going to take care of that dog. The mama. And I didn't want to take care of the dog. And so I did remember, like the hope was so important. So we ended up getting her this puppy, and I'll still remember this. We took her to it's up to church one day. We took her, I said, get up, we're gonna go. And she's already started treatment. She wasn't feeling good. I said, come on, we're gonna go somewhere. So we go up to this lady who is selling these puppies. She didn't know that she was going to get a puppy. My daughter wasn't. This lady also had a yoga studio. So we drive up. My daughter thinks I'm going to make her do yoga. She is complaining and moaning. I am not doing this. No. So we open up the door and all these puppies come running at her. And that puppy, like, it gave her a purpose. And did it save her? No, of course not. Medical professionals did. But it makes all the difference when they have some kind of hope and something to look forward to. And again, and with what I do, I have seen so many people. So I was just reading someone yesterday, and I brought through the grandmother. I said, there was a moment when your grandmother decided she was done being on this earth, and it was like a switch. And she's like, oh my gosh, that happened. She was fine. Then all of a sudden she said she wants to go in the hospice. She was in hospice one day, and then she passed.
Wow.
And I hear that story a lot. Once someone loses that will to fight, it goes pretty quickly.
Yeah. I've also seen many situations like that. Our saying, I used to write a lot. Sometimes I would post it on my Smart Patients, or I had a private Facebook group for myself and my husband. Mm-hmm. And I'd always sign off holding hope. And yes. There was one article I would love to share with you. I'd have to go get it, but it was about a roller coaster, and such a common thing people going through cancer treatments describe the roller coaster. But in my situation, I would say there's times where you're going up the incline, you're hanging on for dear life, and you're so scared. You're just praying, wishing, hoping, holding hope. And sometimes you're closing your eyes and you're just dreading it. Yeah. And then sometimes you have your arms up in the air and you're like, let's do this. We got this. Nice. And we were really triumphant sometimes, and other times we were extremely defeated. And we had to look at that. Mm-hmm. And some anticipatory grief, I'm assuming, had to happen to me. It had to. Mm-hmm. And it had to happen to my children and my husband and our family.
Right.
I didn't focus on that. My focus was not that. My focus was the here and now. And my husband went back to work, and he did things that people were amazed by. And he continued doing that. And he might take time off for another big surgery. 1 year, his tumor had eaten into his C2 of his neck. That's the vertebrae that your head spins on. Yeah. It wasn't good. And it broke his neck. His neck broke.
Oh my word.
We got into the ER.
So, we thought now was he he was laying there one day, he turned his head and it broke. How did that happen?
No, they found it. They'd done radiation. We'd gone to a neurologist in Fort Collins who basically said, wear a neck brace and see me in 12 weeks. I said, unacceptable, unacceptable. I
Mhm.
called our local Denver hospital, Anschutz, and found the best neurosurgeon. And in between these few days, he was out in the garden. It was a Saturday. I was at lunch with some girlfriends. I came home. He was on the couch. I knew, instinctively knew something was very wrong. And he looked at me and he goes, I think my neck's broke. And I'm like, okay, let's get you to the hospital. We got him to the hospital. They confirmed his neck was the fastest ER appointment we'd ever had. In and out, neck brace. And the blessing is this, again, the same local hospital. This is stuff I didn't know. This was still in the earlier stages of his cancer. Handed me the CD of his MRI, which was a gift. That was a Saturday. And my brother offered to drive it to Anschutz, got it there on a Sunday. They reviewed it. They called us Monday morning. They said, you need to get him down here very carefully. And a good friend, my friend Jeannie and her husband Doug, he drove us down the next morning and he went into surgery. It was a very scary surgery because of how they had to try to do the repair. And it was successful. And we came out of that one and carried on with life. And that's how our journey went for 4 years. And sometimes it was worse.
Mhm.
One summer he was in the hospital for a little over a month. Took a long time to get diagnosed. We'd been in and out of 3 hospitals. He had sepsis. He had many issues. And it turned out it was meningitis. They just didn't think that could be
Oh
possible.
my goodness. So I cannot believe this man with cancer going through treatment, so his immune system is compromised, survived meningitis.
He survived meningitis.
Unbelievable.
And excuse me, it was 2019. It was a horrific summer. He was completely out of it. We had to feed him. I mean, it was something else. They'd prepared me. So I've been prepared so many times for his death. And the palliative care team was amazing. And they'd call me and we'd have meetings. He went from that summer into a rehab facility. And at that time we could be with him. So we were with him, and I thought I would be bringing home a man in a wheelchair who couldn't count. He couldn't add 6 + 4. And he was crying and he was saying, my brain's gone. And Christy, he recovered.
Unbelievable.
He recovered, went back to work. I mean, this is what we went through. The cancer had invaded his body everywhere, except his brain.
Mm-hmm.
We had it in, I can't even tell you a list. It was a list. Bone, lung, liver, spine. It was everywhere. Stomach, it was everywhere. And it had taken up its own like party, our oncologist said, in his hip area. And it wasn't responding to the treatments in that area. It was growing. And long story short, the only cure for that really is amputation.
Mm-hmm.
If you call that a cure.
Right.
At least it would eradicate that. We attempted that twice. He had severe issues with each beginning. We never got into surgery. He would bleed out. Something would happen prior. We ended up doing a hip replacement. That bought him some time.
So then you didn't amputate, y'all did a hip replacement instead.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And
I
then
cannot believe this man has gone through all of this at this point.
yeah, and worked. Oh, and there's so much more I'm not even telling you about. And then he went ahead and, long story short, fast forward, It was, I want to say around Christmas or Valentine's Day of 2020. It had taken over the hip, and we'd re-evaluated the amputation, really discussed it with the specialist, and decided to do it. He wanted to do it. He used to say, what do I have to lose? Let's try this. And if it helps the medical profession, it helps the medical profession.
Mm-hmm.
And, his odds were pretty good. If you look at what he went through, it's like, geez, if anyone's going to do it, this guy's going to pull this one off.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah.
So we signed up for April of 2020 to have this done. Well, now here comes COVID marching in.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
We're at a wedding. I've got pictures of us at that wedding. COVID talk is starting. Hospitals are starting to shut down now in March. Talk of surgeries all being canceled throughout all cities, countries. And the surgeon said, we don't know, but your situation is pretty extreme.
Mm-hmm.
We'll let you know. And we got a phone call and they said, we've got him scheduled for, I believe it was April 12th, 2020. When we got him down there, it was a ghost town. My kids and I, we drove him down. I was able to walk him into the lobby area and up to the waiting room. And I kissed him goodbye. I didn't know what I was getting into at that point.
Right.
And I didn't see him again. For 46 days. There was a period in there where we thought we'd lost him in May. And how do I say this? I got into the ER to see him, but it was brief.
Mm-hmm.
And he looked the same. I was glad to see him, but we thought that was it because he'd thrown blood clots in his liver. They didn't think he'd make it.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm like, well, you're going to have to let me see him if he's dying. And I got in there for a brief moment, stayed with him for a bit. He called the boys and told them goodbye. It was very dramatic. And then he stabilized. And I stayed in a hotel across the street and we Zoomed with the doctors. And then they sent him back to the rehab up in this area where we live.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where we didn't know which way it would go. Of course, we couldn't see him. We couldn't go to the window. We tried doing Zoom, but he didn't like that.
Right.
We talked on the phone a lot. Long story short, he was transitioning and none of us really knew it, that he was transitioning.
Did he have a feeling, do you think?
I think he also wasn't sure until he was sure.
Right.
And
absolutely.
The thing was, if COVID hadn't been in our world, we'd have been with him in that rehab 24/7 and been able to be there and be supportive of him. And instead, these people became his family. My brother ran the facility and was my eyes. He was my ears. He was pretty much what helped get me through. Because he gave me updates. And my husband and I had an agreement that he was not going to die in there. We'd get him home no matter what.
That was going to be my next question. Was he able to come home from there?
Well, the time came. It was the very end of May. It was, what is that holiday? Is it Memorial Day?
Yes.
End of May or Labor Day?
Yeah.
One of those.
Yeah. Memorial Day is in May. Labor Day is in
Yeah.
September.
Yeah. And that's when it started, where he's like, I want to come home. I'm done. I need to come home. But they couldn't release him because of the holiday, and we had to release him. How do I say this? They couldn't bring him to us. We had to find a way to get him. And
Gotcha.
that was hard because he'd had an amputation of the hip and of the pelvis. It was extreme. He had a lot of medical care he needed. That's why he couldn't be here. He was very worried about me taking care of him. That's all he would say is, you can't do this. You can't possibly do this. It's insane. It's incredible. And at the time, you couldn't find workers. You could hire companies to come in, but because of COVID, it was very, very hard and limited. And that also didn't help us. So to make a long story short, one day he called, he said, come get me now. He was full of anxiety. He was very insistent, and called my sons and called a neighbor, and we went and got him. And when I got out of the truck and walked towards him, it was so different. I hadn't seen him. He looked like something that I didn't get to watch the transition, put it that way. So it was shocking.
Yes.
And I had to try very hard to be happy to see him and getting you home. And I remember driving home in the truck with my neighbor, and he looked at me and he was bawling. And he goes, how are you not crying? And I just said, I was in shock. I was in shock. Absolutely. And his wife had stayed behind and gotten the house ready. And her son also at the time was had osteosarcoma. He was 17. And he was there when we got home. And him and Jerry had a bond. It was very special.
So now let's fast forward to him actually passing, and now you have had the funeral and you're on this path. Because I'm feeling that at that moment when you picked him up and he came home and you could tell that he was transitioning, that's probably when your grieving started.
It was, but when we got him home, he didn't want to do hospice right away. He was home for 9 days. He died on the 10th day. He died on June 4th. And he had a rally. He wanted to ride around on his chariot, which was a fancy lawnmower my sister got him because he couldn't use his leg. So you use your arms to drive the thing. And we live on acreage. And the kids got him on the thing. And he drove around his property and he saw his property, and he built everything here with his own 2 hands. And he needed to see that and feel that. And so for a few days, it was pretty kind of hopeful. And we had some nurses come in, and he stayed in a chair. He didn't want to get in a bed. And of course, that didn't last so long, but it was tough because of COVID. And a few people did come see him and risked being near him. They wore a mask. And we, had a few people that were here that were able to see him, and he had friends call that the most beautiful things they said to him, good men, friends, crying, saying how much he meant to them. Some came in the home and said it. It was beautiful.
So what do you think after you've gone through this battle, and it was a battle, and all these ups and downs and these roller coasters for so many years, now he has passed, you have put him to rest, and now your grieving actually begins. Were
Yeah.
you shocked at the depth of it, of your grief?
Overwhelmed. No one can describe it. No one can get it unless they're there.
Yeah.
Even if you know your loved one is going to pass and you think you're prepared for it, I thought I had it all planned out.
Right.
Oh, no, no. No, no, no. Your whole world again, like it had 4 years prior, did a 360. And it was nothing like what I thought it would be. And I was isolated because of COVID. So I didn't really have the support groups. I couldn't go do all of that. So I read a lot. I prayed a lot. I listened to podcasts. I
Now,
kind
were
of
there
immersed
days,
myself in that.
were there days that you thought, I'm never going to be able to function again? Or did you always know that you'd be able to pull yourself? And I don't want to say out of it. I don't think that you ever pull yourself out of grief. You bring it with you in a more healthy manner. You never.
My sister came, my girlfriend Lori came, my friend Deb came. I had a team here. I had good support. I managed to pull off a funeral because I couldn't do it in town. So I found a place in the country to do it, and I did it, and it was huge. During COVID, it was insane. And after that, I had a sister who just stayed. And I think I just would jump out of bed and try to keep going. And it wasn't until after she left that I really, really was finally alone. That's when, Christy, that's when it hit me. It wasn't right when he died. It wasn't after the funeral. It was when I was alone. And it was weeks later, and it hit me hard.
I had a reading the other day where the past relative had come through for my client, and my client was talking about how sad she was because she had not been able to be at the funeral. But the person coming through said no, because the relative they had in common had all the support. And then everyone kind of went about their business. And that's when my client stepped in and was able to support the one that was left behind. And I hear that so much because everyone has to go on with their life. But it's when you're alone, when you can just hear the creaking of the house and it's just so incredibly quiet. And there is a quiet that is different when there's not another energy in the house. You can have someone in your house, the house is quiet, but they're sleeping in the bed. That feels different than a house that is empty.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So now in those moments when you have realized I'm alone, what was the thing that helped you the most? What pulled you up the most?
What pulled me up the most, I think some of it is my faith. Some of it was, and I said this to someone the other day, I wouldn't want his death. If a person who's died could come back and look at their loved one that they left behind, they wouldn't want to go, oh my gosh, my death ruined you. And you like ruin the rest of your life by being this shell of a person.
Right?
Heck no.
Yes,
I am not. I'm going to honor him, and I'm going to live my best life. And that doesn't happen overnight. It doesn't happen in a year. It doesn't happen in 2 years. It takes, I believe, time. And it's not like a aha moment. It's something you just take the first step. And that's what I tell anyone who just lost their spouse. I started a Sunday grieving group. And there's been some new people coming in, and the best advice I was given, take your first step. get up and take a shower, make the chicken noodle soup, take the trash out. Don't just lay in bed. And if you need to lay in bed, but get out. And, I'm really into sayings and a lot of the empowering things that are kind of corny, and I really do believe you have to find it within yourself. It's not going to come from your counselor. It's not going to come from your best friend. It's not going to come from, it's got to come from within. And you need to fight hard to find it. And some days you can't.
So this Sunday grieving group, is it on Zoom or is it?
No, it's at a coffee shop. I knew I had nobody. Like, there's got to be widows around here. And I was on have you heard of the Nextdoor app?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Some gal posted on there, she's doing a meeting at her house, wear a mask if you lost your loved one. I went crazy. I don't even know who this person was. And it was just 3 of us. And that was the first time I got to tell my story. And we just bawled our eyes out. And then this gentleman, he told his story, bawled his eyes out. And I'm like, we need to do this. And so I started a Northern Colorado widows group, widows and widowers. And one of the men that was at that meeting said, I want to do it with you. I'm like, okay. So that helps, because when he's not there or I'm not there, we have, somebody to represent.
Yes. And I think that's beautiful. And if that's one thing I can give as a call to action for those out there, because what I hear Carol talking about is what I hear so much from a lot of my clients is the isolation and no one really understanding. Yes, there are lots of people that have lost spouses out there, but like currently I know a few people, but not in my inner circle.
Mhm.
And, I probably know more people that have lost children, which is a whole nother set of grieving. But a call to action is go to Nextdoor app and start a group, do some kind of support, something. And that is the best thing I see people can do for themselves is when you're grieving and when you're hurting, when you can turn around and help someone else, it gives you a little bit of boost.
It does. It helps. It does help. And I've also done, since Jerry died, I went to a widow camp. It's called Camp Widow. A widow founded it years ago when she lost her husband, and it's nationwide. It's huge. And they have large meetings. And I went to the one in San Diego, and I met one friend there. And actually, she just came by last Sunday. She was in town, stopped by for coffee. It was beautiful. It's a bond you'll always have.
One you never asked for, but thankful you have it now.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
And then when you talk about your faith, did you ever question your faith? Why God? Why did you do this?
No,
Is there a God?
Nope. And my husband used to say, because a lot of people would, counselors or some of the team during the illness, they'd come in to talk to you. They'd want to know if he was mad at God. And he'd say, this isn't God's fault. No. He always said that. It's not. And no, never. Not at all.
I do. The overwhelming message I get from people that have transitioned, and, my client comes for reading, is to honor me, live in joy. And you were so spot on with that. Your past loved ones do not want to see you ruin your life or your life be defined by their passing. That's almost doing them a disservice. Now, there is no judgment, because everyone listening to this, I want you to know that you can make it. Say if there's 10 steps in grieving, you can make it to step 8, and you'll wake up one morning and you'll be back at step 2. And that's okay. Don't judge yourself for that. And it's just going to happen. And I know that you might 5 years out, you might have been remarried and be happy in another relationship that is not doing a disservice to your husband that has passed. And also you can still be grieving and happy in your new relationship at the same time.
Definitely. Yeah,
So
definitely.
on those days that, Carol, you wake up, even now, so how long has it been since your husband passed?
22 months. I'm still not
20
like a baby. I'm still not saying 2 years, but it will be 2 years in June.
You know, I am so amazed at how far advanced you are and how well you've done. And it only have been 22 months. So one thing, I want you to give yourself kudos for that. You've done a phenomenal job. I also appreciate that Carol just came back from a trip. She got together with a group of people and went on a trip. And I love that because I think about that. My husband and I travel together all the time. And I can imagine taking a trip by myself without him. Not that I'm afraid to travel by myself, but then there's this gaping hole that used to be someone there. So I think it's beautiful that you found a group of ladies to travel with.
Yeah, it was good for me.
I
I booked it thinking I'm going to do something outside of my box, something I want to do, something just to keep living.
Yes. Yes. And you know what? I also think about when you talk about doing these things outside your box, you've set up this support group, you've done all these beautiful things. What an inspiration that is for your children. You're really setting the bar because they know you're hurt. I mean, they've seen you hurt. But you know what? We're going to do something about this. We're going to take a step forward. Tomorrow, I might be back at step 2. But today, we're taking a step forward.
Mm-hmm.
So
And
now,
that is how it goes.
oh my goodness, I see it so much. Now let's talk about, you were talking about your faith. When you came here to where I live, because you're in a different state from me, you came here, were you visiting your friend here or was it your sister?
Yes.
Your friend.
My best friend, Lori.
So I know that people here are like, don't you remember, you know, I read Carol a while ago and I don't remember reading. So if you come to me, because I don't think the information, I just bring it through. I don't typically remember. I remember faces, but that's about it. So whenever she suggested you come in for a reading, were you like, oh, I don't know, that's kind of scary. I don't know if I want to do that.
No, I was ready. I'm like, yeah, let's do this.
That's the way I remember. Like when I don't remember, because if someone comes to me and they're extremely hesitant, they're with a friend, those are circumstances I might remember, but I don't remember that at all. And so whatever reason, we just kind of connected. I ended up with your phone number somehow. I don't remember how that even occurred, but here we are. So now how did you how did you make that right in your head? You're very, because I will tell you everyone right now, I'm a Christian. I go to church, but sometimes people find that hard to believe that I can be a Christian and a medium at the same time. I do love me some Jesus and God. So I don't know how that's confusing to people, but how did you, but people, I just don't get it. So was that ever a concern to you that you were coming for a reading, but you had a Christian faith?
You know, growing up, they would say, don't dabble in like witchcraft and all that kind of stuff. But it's not, it's a whole different type of thing. And I do believe we have a thin veil here.
We do.
I do believe that.
And
I feel it. I know it. I've seen it. I have proof of it. I've had so many wonderful signs, and some of them are just in my face. The most recent I told you about was that owl. I mean, during the day, not once, not twice, 3 times. And then he came on my deck. I mean, hello, I'm here. Sometimes I believe those signs are what we interpret them to be, though. Because I used to question the signs in the beginning and say, what does it mean? What are you trying to say? What does that mean? Now I think it's what it means when you feel it. Yeah. I don't know if absolutely, but
no, you are right. Absolutely. I have taught classes on this, on how to recognize synchronicities. And it's always about, if you have one of these signs, a cardinal or a feather that's out of place, the first spirit that you think about when you see that sign is the one it belongs to. And
Mhm.
that owl, you sent me that picture. It's like that owl was staring you down. It was just so
It was
phenomenal.
crazy. It was putting on a show for me.
It
Just
was.
its head looking at me. I'm like, wow.
And the more you trust those signs, the more they are sent to you because it takes effort on the spirit's part to make those things happen. And so if you recognize them, if you appreciate them, that just encourages them to use that effort more because they're going to get your attention. And trust it. That's the best thing I can say to people is trust it. Don't second guess yourself. We are, even as mediums, trained mediums, we will sometimes talk ourselves out of things. If we're doing readings and something really odd comes through, there's a saying in mediumship, give what you get, because something will come through and you're like, oh my word, am I seeing what I'm seeing? It's the same thing with this thing, like that owl. You could have easily talked yourself out of that, but you
Yeah.
knew. You knew it was a sign from him. And our loved ones do. They do want us to know they're around us, and they don't want us to, turn bitter and mourn them forever.
Mhm.
So I want to thank you so much, Carol, for being here today. And a takeaway on this is do it. Take a step forward. Get out of bed if you can. If you can't get out of bed, stay in bed. So what else would you say to those people who are they're struggling? They've been in bed now for 2 days.
Talk. The most important thing that came to me from others is we need to tell our story, but you have to be able to be safe in telling it. You need to say their name. You need to carry them with you always. It doesn't end. I mean, I'm still in love with my husband. That doesn't end when they die. If
Right.
anything, for me, it's probably grown a bit, which is kind of cool.
Right.
Yeah. Don't run from it, face it, run into it. And sometimes it slams you to the ground. But you know what? Get up, write about it if you can, sing about it, throw axes. I know women that are doing some pretty crazy things and it's working for them. They're out doing the axe bars and they're throwing axes, and others are, doing, meditations and yoga, and others are find your outlet for it and find your tribe. Build your tribe. It may take years, but you will have, you got to be able to trust them.
Mm-hmm.
And don't let anyone take your grief away from you. It's yours. It's an honor. It's a sacred, sacred thing. And to me, it's becoming so obvious. It's such a gift that I had him. And grief is a sacred place. And I can get why sometimes we don't want to share it.
Mm-hmm.
We don't want to share it unless that person that you're talking to is fully in on it and accepting and not fixing, as Megan Devine, her "It's Okay That You're Not Okay" book. No one's going to fix you. It's not something you can fix.
So now, what was the book you just named? It was garbled a little bit when you said it.
It's Megan Devine's "It's Okay That You're Not Okay."
Yeah.
That's the first book that spoke to me. And just podcasts. I've read so much stuff, and there's just beautiful books out there. There's a book by.
I love that book. It's Okay That You're Not Okay, because it's simple, it's easy, and it's raw.
It is. It's very raw. And the newest book that just came out by the Soaring Spirits, the lady does Camp Widow. It's called Different After You. And it's a really good book that can help you. You can just take pieces from all these books.
Yes.
And
Anne Lamott is another good
Yeah.
author that I like on this. And I love, yes, take pieces. And when you're reading these books, for anyone listening, what doesn't resonate, leave behind. Just take what resonates with you and what can work with you. Even, when I'm reading, training, reading grief books, because I work with grief so much, I'll read grief books. Take what works for you and leave the rest behind.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
I love
Yeah.
that what you just said, I think should be recorded and put out there about how grief is sacred and how you described it. That was beautiful. Such wisdom in that, Carol. I want to thank you so much for being here today. I know it was hard. You had me tearing up today. So anyone, if you're not going to see that, if you're listening to this on podcast, if you go to my YouTube channel, you'll see me completely tearing up over Carol and her just raw, authentic way and approaching grief. And I so appreciate you being here. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Christy.
If anyone has any questions for me or concerns, please email me, christygodwin111@gmail.com. I'm also on all the social media platforms. Thank everyone so much for listening to us today and being with us. And I hope everyone has a blessed day.